Welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into two of the most chilling cases from Japan's criminal history, cited in the previous video of the game SilentHillF. These stories will take us from the crowded Tokyo subway system in the 1990s to a remote village in 1938. Both cases shocked the nation and left scars that remain to this day. And before we dive into them, please like, subscribe, and turn on the notifications. Let's get started. In 1984, a partially blind yoga instructor named Shoko Asahara founded what would become one of the most dangerous cults in modern history. He called it Aum Shinrikyo, which translates to Supreme Truth. What started as a small yoga and meditation group in Tokyo would evolve into something far more sinister. Asahara was a charismatic figure who blended elements of Buddhism, Hinduism, and Christianity with his own apocalyptic prophecies. He claimed he could levitate, transfer spiritual energy to his followers, and that he alone could lead them to salvation. By the early 1990s, Aum Shinrikyo had attracted thousands of members, including scientists, doctors, and engineers, highly educated people drawn in by Asahara's teachings. But behind closed doors, this wasn't just a religious movement. Asahara was building an arsenal. He believed that World War III was coming and that the United States would attack Japan with nuclear weapons. He convinced his followers that they needed to arm themselves to survive the coming apocalypse. The cult didn't start with the subway attack. Throughout the early 1990s, Aum Shinrikyo was responsible for numerous crimes that authorities failed to fully investigate. They murdered defectors and critics. They kidnapped people. They even attempted to assassinate public figures who spoke out against them. In 1994, the cult carried out its first major chemical attack in the city of Matsumoto. They released sarin gas in a residential neighborhood, killing 8 people and injuring over 600. Sarin is a nerve agent, one of the most toxic substances ever created. A single drop on your skin can kill you within minutes. But incredibly, authorities didn't connect this attack to Aum Shinrikyo at the time. Emboldened by getting away with the Matsumoto attack, Asahara and his inner circle began planning something much bigger. March 20th, 1995. Morning rush hour in Tokyo. 5 teams of cult members boarded different subway lines, each carrying packages wrapped in newspaper. Inside those packages were plastic bags filled with liquid sarin. The plan was coordinated with military precision. At approximately 8 a.m., the cult members punctured the bags with sharpened umbrella tips and exited at the next station. As the liquid sarin evaporated into gas, it spread through the subway cars. Passengers began collapsing. People couldn't breathe. Their vision blurred. Some started convulsing. Panic erupted as trains pulled into stations and passengers stumbled out onto platforms, many unable to see or walk. The scene was absolute chaos, something Tokyo had never experienced in peacetime. By the end of that morning, 13 people were dead and over 6,000 were injured. Some victims suffered permanent damage to their nervous systems, vision, and respiratory systems. The psychological trauma affected thousands more. Within days, police raided Aum Shinrikyo's facilities across Japan. What they found was shocking: a massive complex where the cult had been manufacturing sarin gas, experimenting with biological weapons like anthrax and botulism, and even building their own automatic rifles. They had enough sarin to kill millions. Shoko Asahara went into hiding, but was found 2 months later, concealed in a small space within one of the cult's buildings. He was arrested along with hundreds of his followers. The trials lasted over a decade. Asahara showed no remorse, often appearing to be in a trance-like state during court proceedings. In 2004, he was sentenced to death. 13 of his top followers also received death sentences. On July 6, 2018, Shoko Asahara and 7 other cult leaders were executed by hanging. 6 more were executed later that same month. But the story doesn't end there. Aum Shinrikyo still exists today, though under a different name and claiming to have renounced violence. They're under constant surveillance by Japanese authorities. The attack fundamentally changed Japan, leading to increased security measures and a national conversation about religious freedom versus public safety. The Tokyo subway attack remains the deadliest terrorist attack in Japan's modern history, and one of the few instances where chemical weapons have been used in a terrorist attack on civilians. Now we're going back in time to May 21, 1938, in the small village of Kamo in Okayama Prefecture. This case is less well known internationally, but in Japan, it's legendary for its horror and tragedy. It remained the deadliest shooting by a single perpetrator in modern Japanese history for decades. The perpetrator was a 21-year-old man named Mutsuo Toi. To understand what happened that night, we need to understand Mutsuo's life and the society he lived in. Mutsuo grew up in rural Japan during a difficult time. His mother was a sex worker, which carried enormous stigma in the conservative village. When Mutsuo was young, both his mother and father died of tuberculosis, then a common and deadly disease. He was raised by his grandmother in poverty and isolation. As a young man, Mutsuo was reportedly intelligent and good-looking. He seemed to have friends and was even romantically involved with a few women in the village. But everything changed when he began showing symptoms of tuberculosis, the same disease that had killed his parents. In 1930s rural Japan, tuberculosis was not only feared as a death sentence, but also carried intense social stigma. The disease was associated with moral weakness and bad heredity. When word spread that Mutsuo had tuberculosis, he was ostracized almost overnight. Women rejected him, neighbors avoided him. He became a pariah in the only community he'd ever known. Some accounts suggest that women who had previously been romantic with him began to mock him publicly. Whether this was true or exaggerated by Mutsuo's deteriorating mental state, we'll never know. But what we do know is that Mutsuo became increasingly bitter and isolated, consumed by thoughts of revenge. On the evening of May 20th, 1938, Mutsuo prepared for what he'd planned as his final act. He cut the electrical lines to the village, plunging it into darkness. He armed himself with a modified shotgun, a Japanese sword, and an axe. He also brought a flashlight strapped to his head. Just after midnight, Mutsuo began his rampage. He moved from house to house in the darkness, methodically attacking sleeping families. He knew the village intimately. He knew who lived where, how the houses were laid out, and where people slept. The attack lasted approximately an hour and a half. Mutsuo killed 30 people and injured 3 others. His victims ranged from small children to elderly people. Many were killed in their sleep, having no chance to defend themselves. Some accounts describe him going back to certain houses to ensure no one survived. As dawn broke, Mutsuo fled into the mountains. The next morning, villagers discovered the carnage. The scene was so devastating that it traumatized the entire region. Bodies were found in their homes, many entire families wiped out in minutes. By late morning, Mutsuo was found dead in the mountains. He had died by suicide, cutting his own throat. Near his body, authorities found a suicide note. In it, Mutsuo expressed his grievances against the village and explained that he chose to die by his own hand rather than face execution. The Tsuyama Massacre, as it came to be known, was suppressed by Japanese authorities during World War II. The government didn't want to publicize such a horrific domestic crime when they were focused on wartime propaganda and national unity. Details of the massacre were censored for years. When information about the massacre finally became public after the war, it shocked the nation. The case has been studied by criminologists and psychologists as an example of how social ostracism, mental illness, and personal grievance can combine to create catastrophic violence. The village of Kamo never fully recovered. The population declined significantly, and many survivors left, unable to live with the memories. Even today, the massacre is remembered as one of the darkest chapters in Japanese criminal history. What makes this case particularly tragic is how preventable it might have been. Mutsuo was a young man who, by most accounts, could have led a normal life. But the combination of his disease, the brutal social stigma of his time, and a culture that offered him no support or outlet for his pain created the conditions for unthinkable violence.
Two different eras, two different circumstances, but both cases remind us of how darkness can emerge from isolation, grievance, and ideology. The Aum Shinrikyo cult showed us how charismatic leaders can weaponize belief and technology. The Tsuyama Massacre showed us the devastating consequences of social cruelty and untreated despair. These stories are difficult to hear, but they're important to remember. Thank you for watching. If you found this video informative or would like to share a word about the cases, please leave in the comments. See you in the next video.